All right. Thank you guys for coming back to our SPS board candidate series. Right now, we have another individual, Steve Makoski, here to talk with us about his candidacy and his vote, and give us a little information about him and his perspective on what needs to happen for that position. Thank you so much for allowing me to interview you today and get to know you, along with the community and the minority individuals that I support and provide tools to. This interview is just going to be to kind of provide knowledge to the community, talk about, what you stand for, what you're doing, and who are you? My mission is to kind of educate the community and make sure that they are involved in everything that goes on. And this school board vote is kind of pretty serious here in the area. So welcome.
I think so, right about now.
Yeah.
It's heating up.
Yes. So welcome to United Community Change, and tell me about yourself.
Yes. I actually grew up in a place called Harrington, Kansas. I was actually 9 years old. I was taken away from my family and I was put in a foster home. At the age of 9, we had 8 children that all of us were put in foster homes. And then, so I lived a good part of my life in a foster home. And then I went and graduated high school from Harrington, Kansas. From there, I went and joined the Navy. I wanted to see the world, so to speak, and I spent 20 years in naval aviation, been around the world 3 times. I've spent a great part of my life in Asia and another part of my life in Europe. I actually met my wife and we got married in, June 16th, 1978. I can't forget that date. My wife would kill me. And so we've been married for almost 44 years now. It's been really great. I met her in Japan.
Congrats to that, because marriages these days have been on the decline.
I know.
My parents have
sad.
Yeah, it is. My parents have been married for about 32 years. And I don't know how I'm even going to get close to that. But you guys are doing amazing. So I just want to give you your respect.
Thank you. God bless you, man. So. I really appreciate that. After I got out of the Navy, I was trying to figure out where are we going to live. I had to take my family. We had 2 sons, and we moved in Springfield in 1991. And my sons graduated from Kickapoo High School, and one went off to be an aerospace engineer. He worked for NASA for a while, and then he ended up deciding he wanted to work on his own. So he kind of went into a business on his own, but he's also still working for another company in aerospace engineering. And then I have another son that graduated Kickapoo High School and ended up opening up his own business, becoming an entrepreneur, and so my sons, they graduated high school, and then I have some grandchildren. I don't have enough. I only have 3. My sons are.
You can have mine. For sure.
I've never had that offer before.
Hey, not enough grandchildren. Listen, I'm not going to turn down some extra grandparents, okay? And I don't think my kids will either. You can't get enough. So
that is, me, that is important, because to me, it's important because I have actually a lot of families and around Springfield. And we've developed a lot of relationships. And one reason for that is because in 1991, when I moved here, I've been in business for the last 25 years and did quite well getting to know people, in the community and that. And for some parents, I am almost maybe a grandparent to their kids. Like that,
kids, yeah.
You know how that is. The kids come over and they stay and all that kind of stuff, but it's really rewarding. It is, because you want to get involved with the community, and part of that involvement is getting to know the different cultures in Springfield. And that's important to me because I don't know if you know it, I do speak Japanese. I lived 9 years in Japan. My wife is Japanese. Can we get a
sample?
What's that?
I mean, you can't just tell me you speak Japanese. You got to show me you speak Japanese. Can you say
Hi,
something in
hi,
Japanese?
そうです。私はスティーブさんです。あなたはマヤです。And actually, it would be Mia des.
Okay.
It's funny when you try to learn another language. To me, I thought it was pretty interesting because when I began to learn Japanese is backwards when you learn Japanese. In other words,
Yeah.
if you have a sentence, just flip the sentence over and that's how you talk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
like
when
a
you have
totally different side of your brain.
it is. And I had the hardest time, and I would speak so fast to my friends and that in family in Japan, and they would say, dude, you need to slow down, but that was the only way for me to kind of, get it,
Yes,
and I'd speak
yes, yeah.
fast. But it's interesting because I've got to travel around the world. Steve Makoski has gone to probably more countries I can probably list that I have not been to than I have been to, and places like Australia or Mombasa, India, Pakistan, from Saudi Arabia to the United Arab Emirates,
Wow.
over
So you
in
can
Germany.
on your next trip, you can like save your ticket, give it to me, and I'll take your turn.
Well, I think a lot of those days are done. I'm kind of scared to travel, to be honest with you. All the things that are happening around the world is just truly incredible.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. And then even here at home, and when I say at home is because when I speak about some problems that we have here, I'd like to really talk about Springfield Public Schools and our local community. And what got me into this race was back in after the election last year. I seen a lot of issues, a lot of bickering on the school board, stuff like that. I call it bickering. Somebody might call it maybe a little bit of discourse, but the bottom line is this. When I looked at the academic achievement for Springfield Public Schools, last October, I really got into the MAP testing of Springfield Public Schools of all the students. And on the DESE, are you familiar with DESE, Mia?
I'm not familiar with DESE, and but I was given the information about it. So if you can explain to the community members and myself what that exactly is, I would appreciate that.
Sure. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE. And what DESE does is they continuously collect data from all of the school districts within the state of Missouri. Then they'll take that data and they'll compile that data. And that data would be broken down into, as a district, where would you rank within the district? How well are you doing with academic performance? And they do it by grade level. They'll do it by different subject matter like math and science and English. And so I really found some very stark contrasts as to comparing that, what's happening in our schools and the test scores of our children that are in the schools. I'll give you an example. In math, if you go to Makoski for SPS.com, I actually put a graph on there over the last 10 years showing the decline in academic excellence for our kids. In math alone, the 32% of Springfield Public School kids are at grade level or above, 32%. Now, to me, that's a little bit astounding. I looked at that, and then I went to look at Ozark and Nix, Willard, surrounding schools. Why did I do that? Is because if you listen to what's happening within the school district, every year we lose more students. And that's because many of the families, they're moving out of the Springfield district because the Springfield school district isn't doing very well academically, in their opinion. And those things are important because, look, if you're not actually giving the skills or helping transfer that knowledge from the teacher to the students, for the students to be able to get out of high school and excel, maybe become that engineer I was talking about with my son, or being that entrepreneur or getting into the workforce or going on to a higher education. And so let me sum this up this way. The ACT score, a lot of times, is how we look at all of our districts. And the average ACT for Springfield Public Schools is 19.5. Now, 19.5 would not even get entry level into Missouri State University. And just imagine.
And so people who are watching, what is the scale for the ACT?
Well, it can go up to 36. Okay. And so if you look at it in 2011, I believe, that don't quote me, I think it was 22.6 in 2011, and now we're at a 19.5. Okay. The greatest or steepest decline for academic excellence for our kids started in 2015. 2015, we had a superintendent, Dr. Youngman, that came into the Springfield Public School System. If you look at the correlation of the scores with the steepest decline beginning in 2015, you'll find that Youngman, what he did is he came in to our schools and he started issuing Chromebooks. He wanted to go completely technology, and technology is fine. But I want to tell you where Steve would, if he was going to make a decision, and I'm on the school board, let's just say I am. Mm-hmm. And it comes across to the school board, and we have to make a decision on whether we should have Chromebooks or not. I would say, yes, we should have Chromebooks. However, I believe that the basic skills of reading and writing and arithmetic, we should begin at kindergarten up to the 5th grade. And what we should do at that point is we should have books, we should have paper. Those are the real important items that allow the kid to be able to put pencil to paper, get on a chalkboard, those kind of things. And they learn those basic skills. They can read now, And so we always say we want to get to a 6th grade level, right? In reading. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's predominantly what I hear. And so my theory would be is that on the 6th grade level, that's when the Chromebooks start coming in. Yeah. And so we make that transgression and move into Chromebooks because we're not going to get away from technology. We need it. You have a cell phone. Look at the technology we're using right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's relevant because the mind, the sponge that a kid has, I mean, you give them information and they just absorb that and they'll run with it. The real problem with Springfield Public Schools is we have 24,000 students. We have poverty within Springfield. We have it in our schools. You are at DESE, by the way, actually explains by school, by grade, lunches that are provided for children in that. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah.
And so that's good data. That's data we should be looking at all the time to be able to evaluate how well we are doing. We have a superintendent that the school board, there's 7 members on the school board, that says, this is our strategic plan. Okay, Dr. Lathan, now you get out there and you make them kids successful. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so our strategic plan is what we should be guided by.
Yeah.
And right now, our strategic plan, I think, is failing our system. How is it failing our system? I think it's outdated. And I think if I get on the school board, then it would be a goal of mine to review the strategic plan, and let's readdress that so we can help Dr. Lathan really become successful. She has got the power. She has got the energy, and she wants to make it happen. You can see it, hear it coming out of her all the time. I don't want to tie her hands. We need to help her be successful because that 19.5 I talked about, the next year I'd like to see that be a 20.5, and maybe the next year a 21.5. You see where I'm headed with that?
So you're running because you want to give the superintendent, Dr. Lathan, the best tools as possible in order to increase those academic scores that have been on the decline. Am I correct? Am I hearing you right? Okay.
Why is that important? I'm sorry, you weren't finished.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, the next thing is what differentiates you from the other candidates or board members?
I think that's easy. When you spend time in different countries and you actually have the exposure to different types of economies, you have different types of governments, you have different types of cultures. I've been to countries where you'll walk down the street. Now, this might be a little shocking, but you walk down the street and there's guys that's got AK-47 slung over their shoulder every block that you walk, and that's a little bit scary. Just imagine that here in Springfield.
Oh, no.
No, people can't.
They won't be able to handle that.
Everybody be pulling out their guns.
We'd be another show, the Cartoon Network, seriously.
but this is what I'm saying. You're asking, okay, how is Steve going to be different or, different from the other candidates and stuff? Learning to speak a language. And I'm not saying that the others don't speak a language. I know that there are some. But I've had life experiences moving into a foster home. I told myself I'd never let that happen to my kids. And I wouldn't want it to happen to anybody else. And so I bring a lot to the table where people on that school board currently do not have with that life experience and that, I only have a bachelor's degree in business management. I began my undergraduate at one time, but it just got too expensive for me, and so I have Navy experience. So I have different types of environments that I believe that I have a frame of mind that allows me to be able to explore different options and that, and not be so narrow-minded into a direction. And that's where I think that I can better serve. Because if you have 24,000 students, they're not all the same, Mia.
Right.
And by golly, we got to figure out how it is that we can get 24,000 kids on the same page, and that is to excel academically so they can become part of the community with the skill sets needed to be successful.
Yeah. So we can be competitive as a community. How have you received any donations or endorsements from any groups? And if so, what groups?
I have no endorsements from any groups. I have plenty of donations.
Okay.
If you want to eat more, bring it on. I'll take it.
Got some point.
No, we've actually done quite well with the donations because before I got into this race, I already had a plan. We developed a plan, me and my team, and then we started to reach other people and say, hey, this is what we want to do. We want to run Steve Makoski for school board, and this is our plan. And we just get buy-in from those people. We sold it to them. In other words, this is what I want to do. Would you help us? Are you on board with my message? And that's the way that works, And so endorsements wise, now that is a concern for me, and only because of the fact that you'll get endorsements out there or you won't get endorsements just because you take a position and they're not like-minded in position. And I think a lot of times, in my opinion, and I'll just share it with you, that I think it's way too political. I do not want politics in the school system. It doesn't belong there. And unfortunately, I don't know if you've been reading newspapers, listening to the news and things like that. And this is what I'm seeing. And we should not have politics in the schools. We shouldn't have, wayward opinions where we're kind of funneling down a track. An example, what I'm saying there is if you take, and I really don't want to pick on anybody because that's not my intention. My example would be is in 2015, Youngman came into the school system and he went to complete Chromebooks. Well, tell me why it is that we have board members that continue to want to have Chromebooks when the studies reveal that the more that a child is in front of a laptop and the more screen time in that, they actually learn less. But when you have a child that has textbooks, paper, they actually learn more. The longer they're in a book, the more they learn. The longer they're in front of a Chromebook, they learn less. And there's a study that I actually put on my website. And so that'll help you understand what I'm talking about. You go to my website and see that study. and you'll see
Absolutely.
the contract.
And so, and what is your website again?
Makoski
Makoski.
for FOR SPS.
SPS. Okay, you guys go to Makoski for FOR, right?
Yes, ma'am.
SPS.com.
.com. Yes.
.com. Okay, great. All right. Well, yeah, we'll check that out, and you guys check that out as well. So let's get into the Board of Education Governance. Again, I've asked this to all the members, and this is just a section to educate everyone on, why is the school board important? Because, school board isn't usually something that people are happy to just get out there and vote for. Like in the past, people have just been very laissez-faire when it comes to voting for these type of positions. But this year it has become, more people are wanting to be more involved. And so, and we want to get people more involved, as they should be or should have been in the past.
Amen.
But what is the school board member's role and responsibility? And how does that role differ from the role of the superintendent or administration?
Well, most people know that we have a fiduciary responsibility. We have a budget, and we have to ensure that we're operating within that budget. And certainly we have only one employee on the school board, and that would be Dr. Latham, the superintendent. And so it is our responsibility to ensure that we're providing the right plan and the guidelines to the one that's going to enact it. And that would be the superintendent. And so we give that direction by encompassing a strategic plan, saying this is where we believe as a school board, our 12 school district needs to go. And so once we do that, then it's a matter of constant managing. As you can see, we go through every couple of weeks. Typically we'll have a school board meeting in that, but there's a lot of things that happen in between there. It's probably about 35 hours a week, honestly, if you're really engrossed and ingrained into the school system, that it will take that much time every week for a school board member. But even more important, I think that, let me take this a little bit farther. I've also said that if I get on the school board, I want to be in the classrooms, and I want to ride the school bus. And some people are like, I don't think we need you in the classroom, and I understand, because some people say, well, that's a disruption. Well, let me say this: they're not in the school system, right? Or they're not going to the classes right now. If somebody brings a budget in front of me, and they're going to want me to sign off on it after they give their presentation, and everything's copacetic, or everything's, we're reaching goals and objectives and stuff like that. But the real crux of the matter is, after I spent 20 years in the Navy, I learned a long time ago, you have to have hands-on. And hands-on, what I mean is, I want to hear what's happening in the classroom. I want to see what's happening in the classroom. And the disruption would be me knocking on the door and being able to sit down with the teacher and just listen and watch what's happening in that. I take that information now, and I can go to the school board. And when somebody as a department head comes up and gives me a presentation on where their department's doing, I can say, I don't know, let's talk about that a little bit more. And that's really what the involvement really needs to be. Now, people will disagree with me. They're saying, well, you don't need to be doing that. You're a school board. Well, look, we need change, folks. We really need change in our school system to find out really what's happening with the kids, the teachers and stuff. They have so much on their plate. We need to move some of that stuff that's interfering with the reading, the writing, and arithmetic. And let's clear that plate so we can get that in-person learning, maybe balance books with technology. And then we start to see the results. The results are the kids being able to get an education and get the skill set needed when they graduate.
And so what I hear you saying is that what you want to do is that you want to sit in to observe in order to kind of pinpoint what the issues are, so that you can reorganize or take that to the board, so you guys can make a decision on the real things that are actually happening. And those decisions that you make are going to reflect the reality of the situation.
Absolutely. Right? I don't need somebody to give me some story and, in front of my face and say, see, we're doing well. I'm sorry, I'm kind of blocking my face, but that's what happens. We're hiding behind something. We don't need that. We need transparency. That's what I would call it. We need that knowledge base. And by golly, I want the time. I want to do this. Getting into classrooms. I think it's awesome. I think it would be great to have that communication between the educators.
I mean, as a parent, for me, and I'm not advocating for anyone, however, I feel like I would feel more comfortable with the decision a board is making if I knew that they all were kind of hands-on with the school itself, instead of just hearing a presentation and then making a decision off of that.
Now, this is an important fact, though. It's not micromanaging. What it is learning.
Yeah, observation.
We don't stop learning. And then it's up to the superintendent to manage their departments or her department and get things rolling down the road to success. But it is up to the board to know what is happening. And then what we do is we can help evaluate the superintendent, because that's what we do. That superintendent, she is our employee, and we want her to be successful. But for us to help her become successful, we have to be part of that team. And part of that team is getting in there, and finding out really what's taking place.
Being knowledgeable. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the best way to address possible differences of opinion on the board or between the board and the administration?
I learned a long time ago, Mia, that when you want information, I'm going to ask a question here real quick. I'm going to say, do you like green beans?
Depends on how you make them.
That's good. That's information right there. The question is a closed-ended question. I want a yes or no, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what if I ask the question, okay, let's take for a moment, do you like green beans or asparagus? Which one?
I would prefer green beans first.
Okay. So the role playing here is this. When you talk and you communicate to people, the real question is how is it that you communicate to them? Do you just want a simple yes or no, or do you want to get information? And how you do that is you ask an open-ended question instead of a closed-ended question. And that's a lot of times how I've communicated in my lifetime. And so when I want to interact with school boards and I want to get information, I want to be able to ask those open-ended questions so I can hear what my members on the board, what they're thinking, what are they wanting, and then we come together and we take that information and we try to figure out how it is that we can bring it together and what is the ultimate goal that we're trying to reach. You always have to have a goal, and then we can make decisions that way. Now, we're not going to agree all the time. There's no doubt about that. I've spent 64 years on this earth, and I have not agreed with everybody.
Absolutely. Everyone's their own independent person, and it's good that it's that way. We don't want everyone to be the same. Otherwise, we really would be upset.
I know.
We wouldn't get anywhere with that. Could you support a board decision that you did not vote in favor of? Why or why not? So like a collective board decision that was made, could you support it if it didn't go your way, basically?
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't, I'm not going to fight everything. I will defend my position. I think that it's right that I do that, because as the stakeholders, they're going to put me on that board and they're going to say, Steve, this is what we want to see. And if that's what I represent, then I'm definitely going to defend my decision. But I do understand I'm not going to win every battle, if you want to call it a battle. It's just the way it works. I do it every day here at work. In the business community, I don't get everything I want, but I sure work and make an effort at trying to get what I want, because in my job as a director of compliance for Rapid Roberts, people are always trying to, one, sue you. And so I deal with people every day. And if somebody tries to sue me or Rapid Roberts, the first person they get to meet is Steve Makoski. And therein lies part of the communication, because we'll have so many different types of people that have many varying problems and issues, and they're going to give me their story. And then I want to give them my story. And then we're going to say, well, where are we going with this? I mean, how are we going to come to a conclusion? And the same thing happens on the school board. So yes, there will be times that I might begrudgingly vote a different way because my coworkers had a good supportive decision, or they had information that would help sway me in that direction. Yeah. I can be persuaded.
Well, great. We want to work as a team.
That's
but
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So how can the board be accessible to the community and to specific community groups?
Well, I have always said, and go out there and find some of that media and that about me, and go to my Facebook page, because what I do, I put 1-minute presentations about what I would go for. But anyway, how is it that the board and the community comes together? I've been nothing but trying to support the community, because our children are our future, and our future is the community, because your children, they're going to go out into that world, and that world is Springfield, Missouri, or wherever it is that they land. And they have to have that skill set. And how do you meld or come together with a community? Let me give you an example of Ozark Technical Community College. They're having an AMP program, Airframes and Power Plants program, that they're building out there at the airport. And, you don't have to go to college to make a lot of money. A lot of people think that they have to. But imagine for a moment how much a plumber might make, or an electrician, a trade, a skill. Well, the AMP, airframes and power plants, I know for a fact, being in naval aviation, I have that background where if I go to an AMP school, just like we're fixing to have here in Springfield, Missouri, what happens to our community is people like United Airlines, those type of people will come to and migrate to, and it's not just that, is when you're an aircraft mechanic out there in the civilian sector, and that you can make 6 figures. Now, do they have a college education for that? No. But by golly, if we're not learning to read, to write, do our math, those type of things, and actually helping our kids become successful when they graduate high school, then it's not helping our community. And so I think that the Springfield Public Schools is a vital part of the community. And in addition to that, remember I spoke earlier how families are moving away from Springfield? What we want is an environment where we have great retention with teachers, we have an academic success rate, and people say, by golly, I want to move to Springfield. I want to become part of that community, because their schools are good. And the retention part about teachers is the teachers will want to stay in the school system instead of leave us. And we'll actually have teachers come to our school district because I want to be part of that.
Right.
We're not in that atmosphere right now. And that's what I want to help achieve. I can't do it necessarily in 3 years either. And I can't do it by myself. I have to work with that team of 7 members, and we have to achieve academic success, which will help ensure the success of our community. That's how we come together.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as a realtor in the Southwest Missouri area, that school district is probably the number one drive for families who have parents and children, where they decide that they want to belong. They want to give their students the best possible experience and opportunity. And so therefore, they go to the community that does that. Is that Springfield? You kind of answer that. Maybe not right now, but it would be great if that was Springfield, that they can choose Springfield for that reason.
Are you familiar with the Show Me Institute?
What's the Show Me Institute?
Show Me Institute is another organization in the state of Missouri that actually collects the MAP testing of our children. So it's kind of like DESE. The difference is that Show Me is independent of themselves. They have rated out of 516 school districts out of the state of Missouri that Springfield Public Schools District is 221. The top 100 was Willard, Republic, Ozark, Nixa, Ozark School District.
Everything surrounding Springfield.
Yes, I know. And so Ozark's number 5. That's really incredible.
Yeah.
A lot of things that attribute to that, and not to get really off track so much, but what's important is how they handled the COVID situation much better than surrounding schools and that. And then they didn't go completely to Chromebooks and that. And so you can see the success that I talk about, how it is that when you mix in school books, paper, with electronics, the Chromebooks, how it is that you can become successful. The real question is who's stopping us from getting there? And how do we get around that so we can get back to academic excellence for our kids? And that's what I'm all about.
Right. Absolutely. Now let's talk about the education program. You almost touched on this already. What issues do you believe that your district needs to address in its academic program and offerings, and what changes would you recommend?
There's a lot into that question, what you just said. And let me simplify it in some manner here. And that is, there's so many different programs that Springfield Public Schools has, like the IB program, International Baccalaureate program. Well, the IB program isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, here's another way to look at it. You got to get outside the box, folks. We've got to be able to say that, why can't we have an IB program for all students? Now, realistically, I don't think we can do that. However, we have to think that way. Because I can't just say, well, you, and you get to go to the IB program, and you, and you don't get to. That's not right. Yeah. We have to find a program, all these different programs where we're going to be able to come together where we can make the best or provide the best resources for all of our children. And I don't think that we're doing that. Now, how would I go about that? Remember me going in the classrooms. Remember me looking at the budget and being able to look at a strategic plan. Those are instruments that we use that help us direct a path that can help us move in the right direction. It may be that this program looks really sweet. It looks good, but it really isn't yielding the results that we were originally sold on that bill of goods, so to speak. And we were on the board and we approved it. Well, then we have to revisit that and say that needs to go. And if it does go, how is that going to impact the kids and the educators and the administrators? And then do we have a replacement program? Those type of things, And so we have a vast amount of different types of programs out there, and it will make your head spin. There's so many. But then we have so many that a great percentage that aren't in programs and that. And it really boils down to, do you think everybody should have a program or not? And if so, what is that program? How we can come together and diversify it where the different levels of grades and children from different backgrounds and that can actually achieve academic success. Does it meet that standard, And so it really is very, very difficult. And to be on the school board, those school board members, I'm sure that they feel that they're making the right decisions. But here's what I will interject in that is, if you're going to kick the can down the road and you're not willing to really get into the classrooms and ride those buses and learn what's really going on, you don't need to be on the school board. That's the way Steve Makoski thinks. Right. And so it takes work. And by golly, I want to be part of that.
Absolutely. I had one question that I forgot to ask you. Whenever I was asking you about, how are you going to be accessible to the community and specific community groups, I want to know, how has your involvement been, you personally, with minority groups? Or have you had the opportunity? Do you feel like Springfield has a lot of opportunity to get involved with minority groups that are here? Because we're about 10 to 15% of the population, and that's kind of small. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just a matter of knowing them, getting to know one another, and being able to engage with one another. Unfortunately, I don't know that we really have a lot of programs like that. And here's the thing: in different communities, you have good apples and you have bad apples. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example. There is, when we first began the schools, the race for the school board, all right, there's a gentleman by Kyler Sherman Wilkins, I think is the name, all right. Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing he does is he enters the race, and then he backs out. And then when he backs out, the first thing he says is, I'll do everything I can to get Steve Makoski not elected for the school board. Well, he doesn't know anything about me. So how can you make a statement like that? Now, I would respect that if he had got to meet me and we had a conversation, but that never happened. And so I just use that as an example, how it is within the community. If we're not talking to one another, if we're not engaging with one another, then we get lost in our own worlds. We develop our own opinions, and we go our own ways. And sometimes those ways, they cross paths, they collide. And so how do you make the roads parallel? How do we work together? Do we have the same goals? Do we have the same vision? In each of our cultures, each of our worlds, so to speak, we're just not all the same. The real question is, how is it that we can live together, and how is it that we can come together? And so it's like I was invited to a church that was predominantly all Black. Mm-hmm. That's not my forte, and the reason why I say it's not my forte is because I'm used to my church. But was I willing to get out of my element so I can learn? Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's what it takes. Is some people, sometimes you have to get out of your element so you can find out there's something else out there, and if it's for you or not.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, I do want to invite you to our Juneteenth event, which is another way to get involved in minorities and, experience more culture. We'll be having a diversity, equity, inclusion, a 5K run, to support the programs that United Community Change is trying to have in the community. And then also we'll be doing our Freedom Walk, which is meant to bring the entire city together with different backgrounds, belief systems, so that we can show what diversity, equity, inclusion is supposed to look like, in that one day, so that it can give kind of a snapshot picture of what we should be working towards. And then we'll have a music festival that night. So I do want to, invite you to that. And I encourage you to do that and bring lots of people with you.
That's awesome. So, hey, you lay out the invitation and we'll participate, by golly. I mean, it's like going to a foreign country. You don't know these people, but you got to get to know them. It's like get to know in Japan, they practice social distancing. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Because they stay back from one another and then they bow.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Italy, they're in your face and they're moving their hands and they're loud. And you're like, dude, you need to back off, something like that, because they scare you.
Slow your roll.
but hey, yeah, there you go. But once you learn it, you're like, hey, that's just normal for them. And now I accept it. And that's a lot of the life experiences I have. And that's why I think I could really be effective on the school board.
I'm glad that you bring that up because, whereas, someone, might be loud and you think that loud means aggressive. Well, in a different culture, loud is exciting and happiness. Yes. And the fact that you understand that, maybe you can sit back and think about what's being taught to you, while you're in your position and kind of assess, okay, no, that's not what's going on, and convey to the community what exactly is happening, whereas someone else might not be able to.
I can share another story on that if it's okay. We got time?
No.
Okay. Forget it then.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay.
But you can share that with me after. Okay. I'll give some time. I just want to get through the question so that you have the same opportunity as everyone else to answer.
Sure.
What is the role of schools in teaching children about topics such as sex, education, cyber safety, AIDS, wellness, and bullying? And I know that's a broad,
and bullying.
Bullying. They're the controversial topics, that, parents are concerned about. And so what do you feel like the role of schools are in teaching these topics?
All those items you talked about, we should be teaching them. It's part of developing culture. I mean, if the kids are actually interacting with one another and they're learning about those type of things, especially bullying. A good example is I have a mother that gave me a call over the telephone. And her daughter was getting bullied because that she was part of the LGBTQ community. And so being bullied, she would get her hair pulled. I have video that she sent me, and I'm like, I was really just taken aback.
It makes you upset, right?
Well, and she's like, Steve, you got to get in there and you need to help stop this kind of stuff, you know? And so all of those elements, what you just indicated, definitely we need to address. And the reason why I say that is, look, in the school, you're almost your own little family. And you do not know, Mia and Steve, we teach our kids something different at home. Right. But when those kids come to school, they've got to work together. They got to learn together. And part of growing up is some people do get bullied. And some people do the bullying. I'd like to say I did the bullying. But
you're the bully. So you have to have one title.
but here's the other aspect of all of that too. You talk about that, but look at the programs that you have, like band or sports activities and stuff. That's how kids actually really get involved. And that is a real important element. So the real answer to that question is being able to teach that through having access to different areas like that kids could actually engage. It's all about engagement. And it's like, look, Mia, if you got a child there and say that you can't afford an instrument, but by golly, your child wants to be in the band, I want to play the flute or whatever it is, getting that type of opportunity to put a flute in your child's hand. They may just be the next flutist. I don't know what you call them.
And a pianist. I get where you're going with that.
But they would never have that opportunity if it wasn't offered to them, and there wasn't a plan that we can put instruments into that child's hands, and you never know what will happen to develop. So to get a roundabout back to your question is that's actually how we start engaging, and that's how we start teaching. And that's how the kids begin to learn about bullying and all these type of things that they have to have in schools. Because again, remember the first story I talked about is that culture, and that culture of this child wanting to be on the LGBTQ type persuasion, but she was getting bullied on it, so kids are going to be kids and they're going to be bullies. Mm-hmm. The real question is how do we address that, and how do we educate that for our kids?
And so what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're saying that it's a little bit of equity in making sure that there's access for the children to have this knowledge in these different areas, so that amongst one another, they can work together and figure things out. Is that right?
That's right.
All right. So this next topic is, has been talked about, and it's about our special education students and gifted students. What are your thoughts about the district's programs for the special education and the gifted?
I think they're wonderful programs. The only problem is the real answer to that is how much access does everybody have? We can have all the gifted programs and just send those kids out to the community with the skill set and everything. What I'm worried about is the rest of the kids,
Yeah.
The involvement with parents is a very vital aspect of a child's education. You'll get some parents that may be a single parent and they don't have the money and they're stressed and they're sending their kid off to school, and then the kid comes home, and does that parent have the time? No, the parent doesn't have time. They're worried about putting food on the table or paying the rent or whatever the case may be, and so there's so much involved in what you just asked. We could talk for a long time about that.
Absolutely. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because, and I'm just now reflecting on this in my head while we're speaking, having a whole nother conversation back here, that, when I was growing up, there was a lot of emphasis on tutors, and I don't see that a lot anymore.
We do actually, believe it or not, there's a lot of parents that are hiring tutors currently in our system.
In the school.
And the problem with that is if a parent feels that they have to pay for a tutor, the real question is
they should be provided.
Thank you.
They need and that's what I meant, like free tutors,
we need coaches. I would call them coaches, and that's kind of, if you hear me say that term, you really know what I'm talking about. And that is, the COVID and the Chromebooks have put some kids behind. And they're behind a grade level now, maybe 2 grade levels, and they're moving through the system, and the system is failing them. And what happens is if you don't get 1 grade level, how can you get the next?
So it's double. So they're behind 2 grade levels some. And now the COVID is 1. So now they're 3 levels behind, not really the 2, but then you're teaching the 2 level, So it's kind of like that kid is suffering academically. Thank you for explaining that. So
but the answer to your question, though, is those special programs. It goes back to the parents getting involved and in getting their kids into those programs and stuff. We can talk about how we're getting behind because of COVID or the Chromebooks or whatever the case may be, but really the focus is the parents, and the parents getting involved with the education and that. And you and I already know that is not going to happen for 24,000 kids. I get it. The real question is how can we get to those parents to get them to get involved with the kids and stuff like that? And unfortunately, the school comes in and kind of takes the place of a parent from time to time, and that's what we have. That is our environment that we have right now.
Right. So this is a hot topic nationally, and everyone has been asked this question: what is CRT, and how do we approach it in our community? Critical race theory, and I've said this before publicly, I think CRT should be banned from our schools.
And the reason I say that is because critical race theory, depending on who you talk to and what the definition is, and you have to understand what that definition is, it puts children against one another. And the last thing that Steve Makoski wants to do is put children against one another. Now, we can go into diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it can be code for critical race theory. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is critical race theory. The question is, how much of critical race theory or diversity, equity, and inclusion do we have as part of that plate that the teacher has? If we're moving off the plate reading just because we want to facilitate critical race theory or diversity, equity, and inclusion, then the real question is what are we in school for? Are we for diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are we for critical race theory? Or are we really for the reading? What I don't want to see is us bringing in so much on the teacher's plate that the teacher's not going to be able to get to what the real reason for the school is, and that's to teach them the skills that they needed for reading and writing and arithmetic. And so I've always been on that course is that's what's going to help increase the academic success. Then what you have is in critical race theory, you have, again, remember I talked about your definition and my definition could be two different definitions. If we all had an understanding of what critical race theory was, then we have a point of reference to begin from. But until we get that,
what is your definition? What is your definition of critical race theory?
Well, it's critical race theory, as I understand it, was developed back in the 1950s. It was actually developed to be a course in the college level academics. And what's happened is since it was part of the academic culture, it brought in a lot of Marxism and those type of things, those ideologies, and that's creeped into the system where it starts moving down the educational system into the schools, high schools, instead of just colleges. So either it's for the college level or it's for the high school level. Which one is it? Is it for both? No, not necessarily. And so I spent 20 years in the Navy to defend the freedoms and the rights that we like to have each and every day. And I certainly don't want communism or Marxism creeping into our system. And if critical race theory is Marxism, I don't think it belongs within our system. And
critical race theory, because a lot of individuals have put out there that critical race theory is a class that the kids are being taught. Is that necessarily true, or how is it creeping into the system?
Well, if you go back and look at a couple things, I've been in some homes of educators because I'm running for the school board, obviously, and I've talked to teachers and I've talked to parents. And what they have shown me is how critical race theory has creeped into the curriculum and how they make comparisons against one child against another child because of the tone, the skin of their color, or somebody being an oppressor or the oppressed. And then they have these hierarchies of scales and stuff. As an example, when I was born, if you use the chart in critical race theory, as I understand it, is I'm already the oppressor because I'm a white male. Is that really fair to me to be able to say, well, you're an oppressor, Steve? In my heart, I don't think Steve's an oppressor. I want to be there for everybody and help everybody that I can. And so that's concerning to me. And I don't know that we really need to be teaching that to our children. And therefore we start putting children against one another. I don't want to do that. That we've got to be able to find a way, whether it be diversity, equity, and inclusion and not CRT. I think that's the way that we need to go.
Is there a belief that white people have never oppressed minorities? Is that, is that the distinction, or what is this truth? Like, where does oppression exist? Has it never existed? Does it still exist?
No, it does exist. It still exists. There's no doubt about it. The real question is how do we face it and how do we fix it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everybody has an opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
But to go back to what I first stated,
yeah,
I don't think we need to be putting children against one another. And
Yeah.
that's where I feel that we would be failing if that's what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah. So, and the reason why I asked that, like, does oppression exist? Because a lot of people, there's two sides to the story, and, there's, okay, they are calling white people the oppressor. And then there's, oppression doesn't exist, and they're two very extremes, so it's like, okay, where's the truth then, where's the actual history in this? And do we believe that the history, slavery did happen,
Yes.
White settlers were oppressors at one point. Maybe everyone's not an oppressor, but at one point there was an oppressor, and minorities are still going through different things that symbolize oppression, and having these struggles. How, do you feel like people are getting it mixed up, whereas CRT, and especially with, like they say that diversity, equity, inclusion, which is our mission at United Community Change, is to help people be diverse, have equity, and equal opportunity, and be inclusive, to hear each other out. That people are saying that the diversity, equity, inclusion are trigger words for CRT, when really they can be very separate.
That's right.
How do we get people to understand that that is a theory, and a way that people are going about things, and not what's in our school system and what diversity, equity, inclusion is actually about?
Yeah, the answer to that is how each of those is applied and who is applying it. And when you apply any process, no matter what it is, the real question is who's teaching them, who's applying it, and what is it that they're applying. When you have two different people and you're both said, okay, this is what we need to be teaching, this is how we apply it, and we follow that path together, then we begin that consistency. And when you have consistency is when you begin to start making progress. The problem is that if you got one that's applying it in a different way, then you're making mixed signals, missed messages and stuff. And when you talk about kids, I earlier referred to a child being like a sponge, and they're just going to absorb that information. You know what I mean? And then they're going to take it and use it. And so how is it that every child they're the same sponge and they're going to get the same information, so that we understand how it is that we have a lot in common. We have, and we have a lot to learn, because it's history. It's really what we're talking about is history to me. And then how is that history taught us on how we do come together and live with one another? In my opinion, I think we should ban CRT for the simple fact because it puts kids against one another. That I said that probably about 3 times. So
is it being taught to the kids though, CRT?
Well, therein lies the problem about the application, applying it. The problem is this: in the beginning of one of the school years, the school system actually had the administrators and the educators get together. And what they did is they have actually, they had trained or educated the educators and trained the educators about CRT, about diversity, equity, inclusion. They mixed it together is my assessment. And so the real question is why did the school do that? I mean, is it because you want the educators to go into the classroom and to be able to apply it or not? And so therein lies part of the problem. The problem was that some educators saying, I don't want no part of this. In fact, there's a lawsuit right now against Springfield Public Schools because two educators said, I don't want no part of this. You know what I mean? So how did that bring us together?
Yeah.
It didn't, because it was the way or the method in which it was applied. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
And
but it would educate those teachers to know that it exists, though, so they can create their own way of, kind of teaching and having knowledge when it comes to the topics that they're teaching. It's not all, having the knowledge is one thing, and if there's pressure behind it, that's another,
Well, again, it's how each teacher is going to apply it. If there's consistency, and that's what we want to achieve with our students, to give them that education, then it should be all consistent, but it's not. It's not consistent between all of the educators, because the educators, they got the information, but they all were told, just go out there, and use it whatever the way or however the way you want. I can't say that specifically because I wasn't there, but with this CRT topic, I want to get a clarification. You want to ban CRT? Do we want to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion? No. Are they the same? No, they're not the same.
Okay.
I don't want to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay. And this is for the community so that they can get an understanding of your thoughts, because that kind of can get real jumbled, and people need to know the difference.
Yes.
On that topic, and this, obviously, and I've asked this to all of the candidates, it's a national topic. It's a national hot topic. And one of the biggest things that I've saw here in the community and nationally was that CRT, and the reason why I kept asking, is it taught in the school, is a lot of parents are saying, their white children are being made to feel guilty. How do we get to that? And what do we do about that, And are white students being made to feel guilty, truly?
Well, if you're talking to some of those parents, the parents are saying yes. And so why are they saying yes? Is it true? We have to admit to ourselves whether it's true or not. And if it's true, then how do we address it? Right now, I think that, give you an example, is there are people that would say, Steve, you don't know what you're talking about, because it's not being taught in school. Well, the Attorney General has a lawsuit against Springfield Public Schools and actually has the documents as part of exhibits in the lawsuit that actually explains what is being taught or what the educators received in that lesson plan. In fact, on my Facebook page, I make a link so people can go learn for themselves on what it is or what I talk about, and then that way they can make their decision for themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the reason that I would put the link out there is necessarily everybody has to be on the same page. Are we on the same page or not? And therein lies part of our problem, because we're all different and we're all going to have our opinion. The real question is, how do we get past that?
Yeah. And on the other end, because a lot of people talk about, they focus in on the white student and feeling guilty, and they kind of leave out the other end, which is the Black minority student who's been made felt that their history should not be taught because white students are being made feel guilty. How do we balance that out and focus on those children who are feeling like they need to, and what has been told me before, kind of disappear in order to make the whole feel okay?
The element I just heard out of you was history. We should never try to do away with history. History, if we don't know where we came from, then how are we going to know where we're going to go? I've
Mhm.
always looked at it that way. And so history is a very important element. It's like me. I got to know who my granddad was, my grandmom, that's my history. That's where I came from.
Mhm.
I have family over there in the war situation. I mean, I don't know them personally. It's just that my heritage is there. You know what I mean? And so I've got to know where I came from so I know where I'm going to go. But we all need to know history, and we don't need history that's going to be skirted or changed just to fit a narrative. That's the wrong way to go about teaching history. Unfortunately, history, we've had some bad things happen in our history around the world, here in the United States, and some of it we're not very proud of, but should we hide it? No, we shouldn't hide it at all.
Yeah. And, and then with that history, as far as minority, some of the history is still going on today. Some of the oppressions and some of those disadvantages still continue. And a lot of people will box it into history and say it doesn't exist anymore. Do you particularly agree with that? How do we get people to understand that we need to kind of dialogue like what we're doing right now to
Mhm.
figure out what experiences people are coming up against, and not automatically deny that things might be happening that are unseen by you but being experienced by someone else?
Yeah, well, just like you talked about, being able to commingle and have different events so people can get to know one another,
Yeah.
June 13th, or those type of things.
19.
19th, sorry.
It's
See,
okay.
there you go. And it's part of the learning curve,
Yeah.
Those are the ways that we actually begin to start coming together in that, and we learn about one another's history and stuff like that. And how was it that, each culture was intertwined and involved in that type of history and stuff. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And if it's still going on in different ways, means, and forms, and everybody that wants to be receptive to that and learn it, then we can start making strides. But better than anybody else, and I know that you're just not going to get everybody on board. It's just the way of life that it is. And whether, regardless of what it may be, it's kind of like when you ask me, would you vote for something on the school board, even if you disagree with it, and it's a fact of life. That's what happens.
Absolutely. Thank you for
the progress is the important part of it. The application of that is important, and commingling together and learning about one another is the other aspect of that. So
absolutely. Thank you for engaging in this question, because that's not an easy topic. Moving on, what do you see as the major issues facing your school district and public education?
Major problems in our school district is discipline right now.
Okay.
Discipline within the classroom. And let me give you an idea. When I was in the Navy, we would have what we call a commanding officer. That's the person that runs the organization. Let's say that's the superintendent. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in an aircraft squadron, you have different divisions, departments. Well, the superintendent has different departments. And so in the aircraft squadron, this department is ran differently because of this individual that's ahead of that department. And then here's another one, a different person. Here's another one, a different person. Well, think of it like the superintendent is the commanding officer, and the principals within each school of Springfield Public Schools is a department head, right? Mm-hmm. And so each one of them is running their schools different from another. So when I talk about discipline, I can go to a school, I can look at a school. I can't go to them. They won't let me come to school.
Stay out of the school. No.
Well, Mia, it's like this. You look at the school and you can see where the disciplinary problems are in that school.
Yeah.
Then I would challenge you to say this. Go look at the academic success of that same school. make
And
the
compare.
comparison. And so what I'm saying is because the discipline from one principal to another principal to another principal, therein lies where I think that we can make some improvements if all of the principals were consistent in the methodology or the application of discipline. And there's other factors involved in that, and that is because they being the school system may classify a certain event really not in the category where it belongs, and there's a reason they do that, and I'm sure it happens.
Can you explain
that?
Only
because I hear people telling me. That's what I should say.
Can you explain like what type of event you mean by that?
Yeah, let's say that I have a kid that comes up and just smacks another kid right upside the head and knocks him out. Now that could be classified as assault. Or
my book. That's me though.
That's cool. Maybe it was just classified as an altercation.
Okay.
Now, tell me what the definition of an altercation and an assault would be. You see? And so is it properly identified is all I'm saying. And if it is properly identified, then we can begin to address it. But if we don't,
well, I kind of like that, because what you're saying, because as Miss Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here, when you get to discipline, we have those issues, but I can see where it would be helpful as a community if the discipline was across the board the same and defined the same, because then you can assess each child to that definition equally, instead of as an entity, a sole entity alone, and then so much is going on differently in different schools, depending on the type of population it might have, or, how close to the student you might be, what you might classify that action.
Well, and then a more simplistic way would be is that if we are consistent, then we can begin to properly measure it, because you've got to be able to measure things. You know that in your business.
Yeah. And so into the academic achievement.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I want to be able to find these programs, or not programs, these areas of concern. And one of those is discipline, on how we can make improvements in that area. Because if we do that, then that disruption in the classroom could go away, where the kids will get right back to reading and writing arithmetic. Therein lies, we hope that the result is going to be increased academic excellence for each child. And so we bring that 19.5 up to a 20.5, those kind of things. And so until we really get into those core type of issues, we're not really going to address what I think that would impact that academic excellence that I would like to get our schools to achieve right now. And so it's going to be a task.
Absolutely.
I can't do it by myself either.
Yeah, absolutely not. Given all the issues that arise, how can the board stay focused on the student achievement?
That's a good problem. Get rid of the issues.
Get rid of the distractions, huh?
Well, it's kind of like going back and thinking that, well, first off, we have to admit, if we have a problem, we got a problem. And if we're not willing to do that, then progress doesn't prevail. And so that's the way to do it. We have to recognize that we have a problem, and it's not necessarily throwing money at it and increasing the budget, or asking the stakeholders, the taxpayers, to pay more money just for the school system and stuff like that. It's not always creating another program in that. It doesn't work like that. I mean, we think that it does work like that. And therein lies where I started to say, we're kicking the can down the road. We're continuing to do this, and we need to make some changes. And I think that Steve Makoski getting on that school board could help facilitate or foster that change and break down some of those barriers so we can get back to academic excellence for our kids.
Absolutely. How does a school board balance the need to provide a quality education with the need to respond to the local taxpayer burdens? Since, we're talking about tax and stuff. So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I talk to a lot of people, that say, why should I pay more taxes if we've had an academic decline for 10 years?
Yeah.
It's a hard sell. I don't want to give them more money. But then I hear on the other spectrum, I hear like, well, we've got some schools that are really breaking down and, we need to fix some of these schools and stuff. A great example of that is the Delaware Elementary. They rebuilt that school, and that is a school that helps with disabilities, children with disabilities, and they have special needs. And so the facility they had before wasn't quite, in my opinion, up to the standard. Now the school, I don't know if you've seen it since it's been rebuilt. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I need to go in there.
Yeah, I seen it. I spent about 30 minutes with the principal over there, and she showed me around a little bit. We had a talk, and did you know that they change almost a couple hundred diapers a day over there?
No, I did not.
I didn't know it either. So I'm like, dude,
I did not know
we're changing diapers,
I didn't know the extent of their disability program.
Yeah, and they've got some facilities that, that it's almost like a hospital sometimes, in different areas and stuff like that. And it's really quite incredible. And so what am I saying? I'm saying the tax dollars could go to some really great things, and these children that have some special needs can get the help and still get that support that they need for academic excellence, and then they can become productive and stuff like that, when previously maybe that school didn't really support that in the way that it should, and so those are important things. So convincing a taxpayer, like, you need to pay more money, it's going to be very difficult if we're not moving that needle, and we're not. And I do not want more of the same. And so this is where it's important for people to listen to the candidates on what they say they're going to do. Yeah. And when the candidates get there, that we hold their feet to the fire, so to speak, to make sure that they're following through with what they're saying they're going to do.
Or at least trying, because you're working amongst the group, that you do the best duty to get your opinion across and get it, considered.
I don't want the same old thing anymore, Mia. The kids can't afford it. Our community can't afford it. And I want to be part of fostering that change.
So what I'm hearing you say here is that, if our students are academically achieving and our academics are increasing, then possibly the community and the parents that are paying those taxes will be more willing to pay more taxes in order to help even more students who might be disabled, challenged, or in a building that's deteriorating, get some more help so that they can also achieve better.
They'll be stepping up because they know that I want to be part of that. Remember about the teachers want to be part of a good school system, or the people want to move through your community. Right. That's how it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And so as a board member, and we kind of touched on this, what are the thoughts of the current proposed budget for the school district? Where would you look to make budget cuts if they had to happen? And how would you determine your budget priorities? That's a lot.
To make that, to give you a good answer to that, I would have to go back and look at budgets. I'd have to go look at the success of programs, and that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
The simple way that I have evaluated a response for that is I went back and looked at the last 3 years of the budgets and the cost of those budgets. And then I looked at where it is that the increases were there and where it was that we ended up experiencing declines or less funds available. Or was there a program that was eliminated, or did we bring a new program in? And so where I've seen that, I think, and people don't like this, but it's the fact. The fact of the matter is I've seen the cost of administrative costs go up, but I'm not seeing the teachers go up. And so the real question is would I cut teachers' pay or would I cut administrators' pay? You know, how effective is that administrative program? And if it could be reduced or cut, and we still end up with the same result, which should be academic excellence, then let's do that. That's where the cut should come from. You know. The ideal situation is I want to buy more school buses. Why do I want to buy some more school buses? Because nobody's leaving the school system anymore. They're coming to our schools. But until the academic excellence increases and our children are getting the product that they need to get out into the world to become entrepreneurs and getting into trades or getting higher education and becoming part of the community, nobody wants to spend any money. Nobody wants to make budget cuts, but everybody wants to add money to the budget, thinking it's going to fix the problem. And so to be fair in responding to you, it's difficult for me to make that decision. And when I'm not part of the board, I'm not part of the system and looking at all of that and analyzing it all the time. A perfect example is that I remember Maryam Mohammed Ghani last year. She voted no against the budget. And the reason why she voted no against the budget is because she never got to see the budget. Now, how stupid is that? I mean, stupid in the sense that why are we putting a budget in front of the school board and expecting them just to sign off on it? Now, that's not being good fiduciaries of the taxpayers' money. It's not looking after the welfare of our children and their education and the administrators and the educators. It's not. And by golly, I use that word once in a while, don't I? By golly.
Hey,
I'm like,
that's your brand.
By golly. The thing
Makoski,
of it is
by golly. I think you can do that one. I like it.
we have to do better as a board. And don't get me wrong, those people on the board, I'm sure they feel they're doing a great job. And I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying we need to be doing better. And if better means that Steve Makoski gets on that school board and says, folks, let's step back here a minute. Let's look at what we're really doing here. You know, and if I have to be that person to interject that into the conversation that we're having in order to move that needle upwards, then by golly.
By golly. That's
I'm
your
brand.
You need to keep it. Yeah, absolutely. So by golly, you do that. Okay.
Thanks, Mia.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a wonderful, and then I want to give you just a moment, if you still remember, you're talking about the program changes, and I believe we were talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. And did you remember that thought? Because I want to give you the opportunity to add it now.
The thought about
the academic program and offering. I forget what we were talking about up there.
Well, let's dialogue. Let's have some dialogue about it then.
Totally forgot, but I'm sorry about that. But
I think the important part about diversity, equity, and inclusion is that everybody needs to feel as though they're part of the answer. You know, they're part of it. We can't be divisive. We can't be, spreading our community apart and stuff like that. We need to find ways that we come together in that, and how we apply that is very, very important. How you might apply it compared to me, with diversity, equity, inclusion is two different thoughts. And why that is sometimes is because the culture,
Yeah, the
where we come
experiences.
from, and that,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a difficult task to accomplish.
Yeah, it's not something. Look, we're still in it after year 50 or 60 years. So obviously, like, we're not going to get that done in one day. But yeah, did you have any questions for United Community Change? I'm going to give you the opportunity to address the minority population here in Springfield, Missouri, Southwest Missouri, Ozarks area, and tell us, why should we vote for you, and anything else that you want to add.
Well, hopefully, knowing my positions and hearing me, what I have, communicated is why I should be on that board and why you should support me. Now, if you don't see it my way, I respect that. However, it should be readily apparent to you that I have passion for this, and that's very important. I mean, if you have passion, I've always known that you're really going to get involved in this. If you don't have the passion, it's kind of like you're fizzling out, and you lose your drive and that type of thing, and I think the number one focus that Steve Makoski had, and I've determined this back in October of 2021. I said, we can't fail our kids. And right now, that academic achievement over the last 10 years, and be quite honest with you, it's 11 years now. And how do we change that is that we really get into finding out that we're really applying the basic classical education with reading and writing and arithmetic, balancing textbooks with technology and that, and cleaning up that plate a little bit of the teachers, so the teachers don't feel that they're so inundated and overworked and things of this nature, and being able to fill the classrooms with the students instead of the students leaving the school system and that, and teachers on the average, and I don't know the specific number, but I believe on the average, we're losing 160 teachers a year. What can we do to reduce that to maybe 60? And what can we do to bring teachers to our schools, those type of things. And when we're doing all those right things, is the teachers love to teach. And Steve Makoski wants that to happen for the Springfield school system, but 24,000 kids and 3,500 educators and administrators, it's going to be a difficult task, but it begins with the school board having a strategic plan, which needs to be redeveloped. And then we have to assign that strategic plan to the superintendent, so the superintendent can go out and do all of these things that we expect from the superintendent to help increase the academic success. The academic success will build our community. It is the kids are our future. And right now, we're failing our kids. And every day that goes by, another kid loses out. And when I was a foster kid, I said, by golly, there I am again. I'm not going to let this happen to my kids. And I learned a very hard lesson when I was a kid in the school of hard knocks, so to speak. And I like to say it that way. And no kid should have to live the way I did, and I don't want that to happen to them. And so I want to be a part of the solution. I want to be part of that answer, and I don't want to be part of the problem. And the problem is that academic success is continuing to decline.
It's not the focus. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, that wraps us up. I am so glad that you were able to meet with me and give me your view, especially talking directly to minorities, talking about minority issues, things that they need to be educated and go out there and be a part of the community and make the vote. Because it's very important for the children who are there that we have leadership that's going to help them succeed. And so it's really important that our leadership also takes out the time to give us dialogue that we need to make the best proper decisions. And so I just want to say I thank you for that. And I look forward to, talking with you outside of this with coffee and, more about your ideas, maybe even after the vote, see what you're doing or what your plans are after that. So I look forward to following up with you. So,
awesome.
So don't get rid of me here. Also, don't forget about Juneteenth and, come out, see about that event, come out, bring some friends, be involved and help get the community to be united, which is what United Community Change is all about, is coming together to make these changes, not just always doing things separately and thinking we're going to get things done. So I look forward to seeing you there. With all that said, thank you. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.